guys, I'm heading over to the shop. We're working on a live edge countertop for a client. I'm driving them hands-free, don't worry about me, guys. I'm gonna take you guys on this journey. I'm gonna walk you through some of the steps, some of the things that we're doing in this process, and you'll see the before and after of how it started, how it went, and how it ended up. It's gonna be a cool video. Stick around, and I hope you guys enjoy it. See ya. Now, if you never worked with a live edge slab before, they're extremely heavy. These grab-o tools makes lifting 4x8 sheets and live edge slabs a breeze. Sam is able to move 4x8 sheets around the shop like it's nothing. They suction onto your material and then you can just easily lift it up and move it around. This slab is currently 2 inches, so we need to take it down to 1.5. So we're actually gonna take it over to our lumber yard where they do a lot of the milling of these live edge slabs and bring it down to about 1 5/8 inch. And then we're gonna take it down the rest of the way through sanding and running it through our drum sander. If you know the name of this machine right here, this CNC machine, comment it down below. This thing is a beast. It has this massive 18-foot bed and it does a phenomenal job flattening our slabs. Then from there, we're just removing all the bark, the loose wood that's sitting around cedar. If any of you guys worked with cedar, you know it's extremely soft. So you want to make sure to remove all the bark, any loose spots, debris, dust, dirt, really get in there to pull it out because epoxy doesn't do well with that material. It'll just pull away over time. So I'm just using my chisels. I had some Rockler chisels and some DeWalt chisels. Everything that I'm using will be down below in the description. So if you aren't familiar with any of the tools that I'm using in this video, feel free to drop a comment asking me what it's for, and I'll definitely help you out there. After we clean up the voids, then we are Tyvek taping off these openings because we are pouring epoxy. You'll see later on in the video what happened here. It is crazy. All right, you guys, so now we're at the point where it's time to fill these voids before we start working on the actual top and the bottom. Now, this video is sponsored by TotalBoat Epoxy. It will be our go-to epoxy moving forward for all of our projects until said otherwise, but I highly doubt we're gonna be switching over from this to anything else simply because I've used it for my table and my table is still in pristine condition since 2019, so 4 years. But this stuff right here, this Fathom, is a really high quality, high durability product that TotalBoat offers. And we're actually gonna be using this for our deeper voids. And then we're gonna be using tabletop epoxy for some of the smaller voids. I think it's gonna come out really nice and it's gonna look really good. So we're gonna go ahead and get these voids filled using the Fathom. I'd rather call this Phantom. Should be called Phantom, TotalBoat Phantom. That's actually pretty cool. TotalBoat Phantom. I like that. Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and do that and watch the video. Now it's go time, baby. Make sure you have your safety wear on. It's a 2-part process, 2 parts resin, 1 part hardener. You mix those bad boys together, give it a nice stir for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then you add the pigment. We're using Liberty Copper from Black Diamond, link down below, and just mix it up for another few minutes. Then once you've mixed everything together, you wanna let it sit for about 20 minutes just for any bubbles to come to the top and pop. From that point, you could pour in those voids. Now, this is where things started to get a little shaky. Ugh, it hurts me watching this. You'll see why. But we're just filling in the voids. I put caulking around the cedar so I can overfill some of the voids so that the epoxy didn't contract while it was in that void. And then I'm using tabletop for the smaller voids. This stuff is thicker. You just let it sit, let it harden, and then you can sand it smooth and it's perfectly fine. Get your blowtorch out and blow them bad boys down. Get those bubbles out. All right, what's up, you guys? So it's been about 7 days now. The epoxy is all dried in all of these deep voids. As you can see, the table is a little different. Well, we had an accident. The epoxy actually poured out from underneath the table. When I built my river table, I made a whole mold, but I was seeing guys online just create voids with the Tyvek tape. It didn't work. I don't think it really works for big voids. You can tape it off, but you still want to create some type of dam system to block off the epoxy from pouring out. I had to screw into the table, which is perfectly fine because most of the outside edges are gonna be cut off anyways. I'm gonna clean up some of these voids here. We're gonna get it sanded flat, and then we're gonna begin the prep process to pour the tabletop epoxy over top, utilizing TotalBoat tabletop epoxy. Yeah. This was a process in itself, removing all of the particle board, the Tyvek tape. I had to get really creative to remove this stuff simply because the epoxy stuck to it. I should have taped off this particle board before installing it, but I didn't. It's fine because I used a hand planer to remove some of the higher spots, and that worked like a charm. If you have a hand planer, it'll definitely help out. Here you go right here. And then that DeWalt portable shop vac is phenomenal. You take that literally anywhere and do whatever. Here you have Koa standing right behind me, you know, being rained on, doesn't want to move for whatever reason. We're just going through, removing these high spots, and then it's time to cut the slab into 2 pieces. So I'm measuring from one side, finding the halfway point, measuring in the middle, finding the halfway point, and taking the outside edge and finding that halfway point, and then we're just slicing it down the middle like butter. Listen, I love this conveyor belt from Bora Bora. It makes lining up things super smooth and easy. As you can see, your slab just sits on it. You run it through that drum sander. There's no high spots. It literally just pulls it straight through. And all we're doing is we're just bringing it down a 32nd of an inch each pass. Once you got it down to the Cedar, then we're cleaning up the live edge. We're using our Surf Prep Pro to clean up those edges. It sands everything to a fine dust, and it cleans it up super quick and easy. From that point, you know, I'm just squaring out that back edge. So I'm using a 8-foot piece of rubber wood, scribing a line all the way down, and then pulling out the track saw to just cut a straight line all the way through. Then we're just cutting a 45-degree profile right here on the edge, being creative with our track saw. Yeah. I could have waited to do this part here, but you know, I was just working it based off of where the wood was. So we're just using a palm router and putting a 45-degree chamfer right on that edge to match what the client has in his house, and then squaring off the edges with a straight edge. You'll want to be sure to get the measurements of this aluminum track for your LED lights. This digital caliper makes that easy. Once you have that measurement, then you just swap out the blade, throw a dado into your table saw if you have one. You could use a router for this, but the table saw makes it so much more easier. And then you just route out, or you just scribe that dado underneath your live edge slab. Make sure you get your height right. And then we're just running it through. Bada bang, bada boom. If you're working with live edge slabs, these disc grinders are super clutch. They make grinding out an edge and making it look like an artificial live edge so easy and smooth. It takes away material quickly. There's 3 different levels of the disc. Once you've grinded it out, you want to make sure to sand it smooth so that it mimics the live edge. And then now all I'm doing is I'm using the tabletop epoxy to coat the bottom of the bar top.
6.5 hours later. Day 2. 2,000 years later.
All right, I'm back after 50 billion years of mixing. We're just spreading that epoxy around the bottom, just moving it around, sealing the bottom off so that it's not exposed to moisture. We're also getting in the dado track. I made the dado track about 32nd of an inch bigger than it needed to be, just to compensate for the epoxy that I was just gonna brush in there. And then we're just spreading it around. I could have used a notched trowel, but I just used a simple paintbrush from Home Depot. Pull that flame out, pop those bubbles, get it to level, and now it's time for the install. The client had Corian countertops in his kitchen. Make sure if you're doing this project, you have some type of help. This stuff is super heavy. I was trying to be a He-Man and lift all of this up myself. I actually hurt my upper back doing so. This stuff is so heavy. And then it's one piece on top of that. It wasn't broken into 3 pieces, which made it even worse. But once you remove the Corian countertop, you also had this particle board that was underneath that you also had to remove. And this was also one piece and extremely heavy. So I added an outlet on the inside of this cabinet for the LED lights because there wasn't any outlets, and just pulled it through the 2x4 framing for that bar top. So we're using these steel brackets to support the bar top. These are heavy duty. They can support up to 300 pounds per support. They mount directly onto the studs from the bar. And then from there, once those are mounted in place, I pulled out my protractor to get that angle right at the center of that countertop. And then I'm just cutting the cedar so that they line up. That protractor makes cutting any angle super easy. Make sure you go pick up one of those if you don't already have one. I made another video of it last year using it on site. To ensure the bar top sits flush on this surface here, I had to route out a dado for the wires to run through. Those wires are gonna pop out the outside edge so that they don't interfere with the way the bar top sits. Once we had those in place, I came back over, I found where all the supports were located, and basically I am routing out the bottom of the bar top so that the steel supports sit within the cedar top. This is important if you want to ensure that your bar top sits flat on the surface of the supports, or you can route into the supports and then drop your bar top right on top of the supports. Either way works. Just test fitting everything, make sure that they align. I left a little bit of a gap for expansion and contraction of the wood. This last edge gave us a run for our money. I had to make this template out of 1/4-inch sheets of plywood to get the right angles and all. And then I just took that outside and then traced it over to this last piece. That one edge was a little difficult, so I had to improvise how to cut it. So I just used the track saw, and then I came back in with my jigsaw to cut it off completely. All right, now we're getting to the fun part. Everything is fitted. I've tested everything. It all lines up. Now it's time to attach the countertops together. There's 3 parts, and I was thinking of how I was gonna do this, and I found this method on Amazon. It's using zip bolts. This is the template for the zip bolts, but essentially the way it works is you attach this template on, you route out the slots for the zip bolts to sit using this flush trim bit, and then you take this zip bolt, which you see right here, and you latch it onto both sides, and then you screw them into place. I like this method better than what they have at Home Depot and some of the box stores because you screw directly from the top instead of using some type of wrench or key to screw in from the side, as you can see here. It makes attaching countertops so easy and simple. And then we just go back over that chamfered edge with the palm router and just clean it up one more time. Oh, and here's some secret sauce for you. If you ever have edges that aren't exactly lined up, get some glue, some sawdust, sand it smooth, and it'll look like there's no seam. Here we are using that disc grinder once again to clean up that edge. You saw how distorted that edge was. Now look at it. You just clean it up, sand it smooth, add some glue so that any exposed seam is tightened up. And then now you have a seam that looks like one piece. Here you can see the dado we added to the bottom of the bar top. This is where the aluminum track is gonna sit. We cut some pieces, we added it to that dado, and essentially the strip light is just gonna float all along the bottom of this bar top, right at that outside edge. Now we're using our favorite substance, PL glue, to attach the countertop onto the base. We shouldn't have done this because it made pouring the epoxy too hard while it was in place, so I had to pry it off and remove it. But this is the reaction of a successful test fit. Yeah, baby. Everything is in. Now it's time to work our magic. I pulled out a tack cloth just to remove any high spots, any loose debris, sawdust that was left on the cedar top. And then we mixed up some tabletop. Don't use a drill. Do this by hand. The drill adds too much bubbles to the epoxy. As you'll see here, it comes out like milk. Fortunately, the bubbles do pop. You have to torch them quite a bit. Don't keep it over the same spot, but just over time, just continuously torch the epoxy so that it pops the bubbles. And then as it warms up, the bubbles also pops. And I'm just using a trowel to just spread the epoxy around, using this paintbrush here to just clean up that edge to make sure the epoxy flows over the edge. And then once that epoxy dried, the next day I removed the countertop and brought it out to the garage because this made pouring epoxy so much easier than doing it in the house. Now I'm using a notch trowel just to spread the epoxy around, get it as close to the edge, but not all the way to the edge as possible. Once I had the epoxy spread throughout the whole top, then I let it flow over the edge and just clean up those high spots underneath. Pull out that torch, pop any bubbles, and you just repeat that process over and over and over again. We did 3 coats. The last coat was about an 1/8 inch thick, and you want to make sure that every 10 minutes you're coming back in to pop any bubbles, check if any bugs decided to commit suicide, because they always do for whatever reason. The best part about these projects is when you come the next day and the epoxy leveled, it looks good, there's no bugs in the epoxy. It's like winning the Super Bowl. So we just put everything in place, and now we're screwing everything in from underneath through those steel supports. I could have made these slots a little bit smaller, but I added a little bit more. That way the countertop sat flush. And I'm just adding that LED light strip onto this aluminum track. Don't worry, there is a diffuser, so you're not seeing the bumps of the lights. You can see here I'm using this frosted white diffuser. It just diffuses the light, makes it a little bit more softer. And then once that was in place, it's time. If you made it this far to the end of the video, please subscribe to the channel. It helps out. Be sure to leave a like, a comment. Let me know your thoughts of this project. I thought it came out great. The client loves it. Whenever he has friends, they love it as well. We're actually gonna do a part 2 for the island. So be sure you subscribe and turn that notification bell on so you're notified about that video.